Good to see everyone tonight. We still have some visitors with us that we had this morning, now we have tonight. We're happy to see you and that you decided to come with worship with us again. Of course, being that it's the new year, I wanted to do something very interesting, and especially when we're starting our new theme of Our God He is Alive. I want to do something along that line. This is the first Sunday of this year, 2016. And what I decided to do is I wanted to actually talk about the power in prophecy. And I think it's something that I know personally as me as a Christian, I feel like I have missed out on. Because what I do is I read the prophecies in the Old Testament, and then I turn and I read the prophecies in the New Testament fulfilled in a couple of seconds, and I don't get it. I miss that 800-year gap in between when it was actually prophesied and when it actually happens. And of course today people try to make prophecies, and we see it out in the world, and they're all very mysterious. They're not specific at all, but they're nothing like the prophecies we read about, especially in the Old Testament. They're very specific. They have a point. Of course, there is still some type of mystery to it, but then after it is said specifically of what was going to happen, you read about it later actually happening, actually coming true, even when some of these prophecies were 500 plus years away from each other. It proves that these people must have had some type of supernatural influence, because it'd be impossible to predict what they actually predicted and what they wrote down. Some are very skeptical of the Bible. Maybe some of us are Christians and we just have our doubts, and we have a hard time, and maybe it's a growth thing, we just haven't gotten there yet. But we are not as in awe of the messianic prophecies that are fulfilled with Bible passages. So I read the prophecy in a Bible passage in one book, and I go to another Bible passage and I see it fulfilled. So basically, some that are very skeptical and maybe want to be mean, they'll try to make fun of that process of reading about the prophecies fulfilled in the Bible, and they say, well, you're just using the Bible to prove the Bible. And that doesn't make sense. That's illogical, and that's what they'll say. And like I said, I think it's a growth thing. I think the messianic prophecies are the most thing to be in awe of in the Bible, but maybe these people just haven't gotten there yet. So what I wanted to do tonight is show you prophecies that were prophesied in the Bible, but are fulfilled from non-biblical sources. So you have hundreds of people agreeing that aren't Christians, that aren't Jews, that aren't even godly people, agreeing that biblical prophecies actually came true. And what it proves is that our God's alive. He's real. And He gave these holy men prophecies, and they wrote them down, and then it actually happened because it all came from God. So this is what you get out of the power of prophecy, and our key guy to go to for this would be Daniel. If you go ahead and turn there and read Daniel chapter 8, and then later we'll read chapter 11, but you see him lay out some prophecies that it actually comes true much later on, proved by hundreds of different ancient historians. As I go through this, there's two things I need to make known, just as I get it out there. Number one, there's a lot of hard words that I'm going to have to read today. So I don't need a line of people telling me which words I mispronounce. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and apologize. I'm going to do the best I can with the words I got. Number two, some of my dates are probably going to be off 1 or 2 years. So all my dates up here are around that date. So just something to think about as we go through this. Let's turn to Daniel chapter 8. As we're turning there, let me quickly give you a review of something probably a lot of us already know about. Nebuchadnezzar has a dream in Daniel's life, and Daniel has a dream in his life. And basically the dreams line up the next 4 empires. And what we do is famously, Nebuchadnezzar has the vision of the statue, and the statue represents each kingdom that's going to come after him. Daniel has a vision of the different beasts coming out of the sea. And this is just a quick review of that. So we know that the king of Babylon, Daniel was told this in his vision, was going to be Babylon. It represents the head of gold. The next part, we are not told yet in these passages that this is the Medo-Persian Empire, but we do know that there's another kingdom that's going to come. It's going to be a dual kingdom of 2 arms made out of silver, and he sees that as something like the bear in Daniel's vision. Next, he had another kingdom that was going to come. That's really cool, isn't it, the way I did that? The next one is going to come is this, basically the top of the legs, which is going to represent the next kingdom that's going to come. We know that as Greece. Daniel sees it as a leopard. The next kingdom was going to be these legs. We know it as the Roman Empire. Here he says dragon, but it was just this beast that was indescribable to Daniel. The next one that came, and I censored this because this guy didn't say something right, but he says that these things, the toes, represent the divided kingdom, the divided kingdoms that are going to come from the Roman Empire. I've also heard the different emperors that are going to come from Rome. I've heard lots of things for this one. All that really matters is that the rock comes tumbling down the mountain, and it destroys this thing, and the rock's Jesus, and he establishes Jesus' kingdom, God's kingdom, forever. And that's his main point here. It's also the main point in Daniel's vision. The Son of Man comes in the clouds when the Ancient of Days is seated, and all these different kingdoms don't matter anymore because all is given to Jesus. His enemies are put at his footstool, and he rules his kingdom forever and ever. And that's the main point of these prophecies. But you ought to go ahead and, as a review, these are the different kingdoms that Daniel lays out. Now let's get into chapter 8. Chapter 8, he has a vision, Daniel, of a ram and of a goat. Now let's read the first couple of verses of chapter 8. Chapter 8, verse 1, in the 3rd year of the reign of King Belshazzar, a vision appeared to me, Daniel, after the one that appeared to me the first time. I saw in the vision, and it so happened while I was looking, that I was in Shushan the citadel, which is the province of Elam, and I saw in the vision that I was by the river Ulai. And it lifted up my eyes and saw there standing beside the river was a ram which had 2 horns, and the 2 horns were high, and one was higher than the other, and the higher one came up last. I saw the ram pushing westward, northward, and southward, so that no animal could withstand him, nor was there any that could deliver him from his hand. But he did according to his will and became great. And as I was considering, suddenly a male goat came from the west, across from the surface of the whole earth, without touching the ground, and the goat had a notable horn between his eyes. And he came to the ram that was 2 horns, which I had seen standing beside the river, and ran with him with furious power. I saw him confronting the ram. He was moved with rage against him, attacked the ram, and broke his 2 horns. There was no power in the ram to withstand him, but he cast him down from the ground and trampled him, and there was no one that could deliver the ram from his hand. Therefore the male goat grew very great, and when he became strong, the large horn was broken, and in place was 4 notable ones came up toward the 4 winds of heaven. We'll stop there. So he's in Shushan in this citadel. Interesting about this citadel, 100 years later, where Daniel is right now, this is where all the events of Esther are actually going to take place. But this is where he's in this province of Elam in the citadel, and he has a vision of a goat with 2 horns. One horn's bigger than the other horn, and he's great, he's powerful. A goat comes flying from the west, doesn't touch the ground, destroys the destroys the ram. Then the goat becomes great. As the goat becomes great, his horn splits up into 4 parts. Now, as prophecies goes, if it just stopped there, we would all be confused. Because we just heard about a dream, or basically just heard about a story about a ram and a goat only has 1 horn, and the goat killed the ram. However, in this prophecy, the angel Gabriel goes on to explain what everything is. Look, flip over in verse 20. Verse 20, this is the angel Gabriel explaining what the vision was in this part of the prophecy. The ram which you saw having the 2 horns, they are the kings of Media and Persia. And the male goat is the kingdom of Greece. The large horn that is between the eyes is their first king. As for the broken horn and the 4 that stood up in his place, 4 kingdoms shall arise out of that nation, but not with its power. So here Gabriel gives a prophecy through Daniel that is very specific. Very specific. Now, this is in the 3rd year of Belshazzar, the 2nd king, Nebuchadnezzar's son, that Daniel's going to work for. This is around 558 BC. And he is told about the next kingdom that will replace Belshazzar, and this will happen in Daniel's lifetime. But we know about Darius the Mede. Cyrus the Great and Darius the Mede would conquer Babylon and take over the city, and Daniel would start working for Darius instead of for Belshazzar anymore. So the next that Gabriel says is going to happen, that this ram is going to be able to rule the world, and it's going to be a dual kingdom. It's going to be Media and Persia. And that's what it was. Cyrus the Great was the king of Persia. Darius was a king of the Medes. So basically, one was greater than the other. Cyrus the Great was kind of the main guy of Persia. Then Darius worked for Cyrus the Great and ruled over Babylon. And we know that Daniel worked for Darius the Mede, if that makes sense. But here, Gabriel goes ahead and explains it before the Persians take over. This is when he's still living in Babylon, well, still the Assyrian Empire under Belshazzar. We also learn that the goat has one horn, and Gabriel says that it is the king of Greece. It is Greece. Now, if Daniel would have told someone in 558 BC that Greece would destroy the Persians, they would have laughed at him. The Greeks couldn't get anything together. What the Greeks were doing at this point is there were different city-states, Athens and Sparta and all these people, and they're just killing each other. There's no unification. They would have laughed at this, but it says that he flies from the west, he breaks the horns of the ram, and he destroys it. Then we also learn that as soon as the goat looks like it's coming to full power, his horn will break, and it will split up into 4 parts. Gabriel says, again, very specifically, these 4 parts represent the 4 kingdoms that will come from Greece. So this is only what we get from the text. We get all this from the text. We haven't looked at anything else. 227 years pass. And I want you to understand the length of this time. 227 years, that would be the equivalent of someone today prophesying what's going to happen in 2243. That's a long time. I can't even think that far. I don't know what the world's going to be like in 2243. But this is what Daniel's prophesying here. This is the length of time. If we want to look at that number backwards, from 2016, 227 years ago, would have been 1789. That is a long time. That's so long that this was going to be actually the first year that George Washington's going to be elected in 1789. And this is the year that the U.S. Bill of Rights is created. This is when really our country started, 227 years ago. So when he makes this prediction, it is from a long way away. There's no way that Daniel is just making here a good guess. This is a huge amount of time. And guess what the prophecy does? It happens. It happens just like Daniel said 227 years ago. In 331, and this we all get from non-biblical sources, is that Alexander the Great, which is Greece, he's going to take over that area. He's going to take Greece, and they're going to basically fly into Persia, and they're going to wipe them out. He's going to take Babylon. I think it was interesting here that he says the word that he doesn't touch the ground. And I think what he's talking about is just how quickly Alexander the Great is going to take over Persia. It's going to be extremely fast. He's going to really only do it in 4 years. And we'll talk about like Derrick Henry, and we'll talk about Cam Newton. And I really just wanted to mention Derrick Henry, but I know so many of Matt would be mad at me if I didn't mention Cam Newton as well. But what will we say about them when they're playing some defense and they're doing incredible? Well, they flew over the defense, right? They were flying, nothing was stopping them. I think that's the way this is used. He just flew over them. There was nothing that they could do. Darius III is going to be the last king of Persia, and he's going to be flee at the Battle of Gaugamela, and it's going to be over in 331, and truly the goat here will destroy the ram. This is a picture of the conquest. I don't know how well you can see it, but in 334, this is when he attacks. He has 3 battles, Granicus, Isis, and then the last one that I just talked about at Gaugamela. And what he does here is he just takes over. The Persians, they try to burn the land to stop them. They try to set up all these forces. Here at the Battle of Granicus, the Persians actually have 2 times more people fighting that battle than Alexander the Great, but it doesn't matter because the goat destroys the ram. He keeps on going all the way down, and there's just one thing I want to mention here. He seizes Tyre, and he puts a siege on Gaza, but what city does he skip here? He skips Jerusalem. He does not touch Jerusalem. Now, it's weird because there'd be a lot of stuff in Jerusalem. Ezra and Nehemiah would have already traveled down there. That gold, that's what the book of Ezra is all about, is transporting all that gold from Babylon back to Jerusalem, to the temple. Why did he skip it? Why did he skip it? Well, Josephus will give us the answer to that according to his sources. He does not seize Jerusalem in 332. The reason why I'm showing you this is this right here is non-biblical evidence that Daniel was written when Daniel says he wrote the book. Josephus here records that Alexander the Great read the 200-year-old book of Daniel. So what happens is Alexander the Great gets to Jerusalem. His army wants to take over the city like they've done to every other city. But Alexander the Great sees the high priest walking out to meet him. And Alexander the Great claims that he had a vision before he even left Macedon that this person was going to walk to him, this person was going to be important. And I don't think it's crazy to think that a king had a vision back in this time. Nebuchadnezzar, he had visions, didn't he? But this is just Josephus, so you can take what you want to take from this. What happens is that the high priest comes out. He meets Alexander the Great. Alexander the Great goes with the high priest in, and this is what's going to happen. He's going to be read the book of Daniel. Here, just this one clip of it. And when the book of Daniel was showed to him, wherein Daniel declared that one of the Greeks should destroy the empire of the Persians, he supposed that himself was the person intended. And he was then glad. He dismissed the multitude from the present. He decides later not to destroy Jerusalem because of the book has been read to him. And he actually asks if he can make a sacrifice to Jehovah. And the high priest allows him to do that through the Levitical priesthood. It's very, very interesting. Now, what the problem is, and the reason why I bring this up, is that you're going to see how accurate Daniel really is. And when the world sees how accurate Daniel is, they get really, really creeped out because they don't understand. And if you don't want to believe in God and you read the book of Daniel, you have no choice but to say that Daniel's fake and that it was written after all this stuff already happened. But then you have historians like Josephus that'll tell you, no, it was written when Daniel said it was written. And it was written to the point of that it was way before all this stuff happened. And Alexander the Great actually read it and he believed it because of how incredible the power of prophecy is. So even he would attest to this. Let's move on to something else. Chapter 11. Chapter 11, here now, Daniel working for Darius the Mede. So the Persians have taken over the city, and they're none of the ones, the ram is now ruling. And he's going to give another prophecy. Verse 1. Also, in the first year of Darius the Mede, even I, stood up to confirm and strengthen him. And now I will tell you the truth. Behold, 3 more kings will arise in Persia, and the 4th shall be far richer than them all. By his strength through his riches, he shall stir up all against the realm of Greece. Then a mighty king shall arise, who shall rule with great dominion and do according to his will. And when he has arisen, his kingdom shall be broken up and divided toward the 4 winds of heaven, but not among his posterity, nor according to the dominion which he has ruled. For his kingdom shall be uprooted, even for others beside these. Now again, just staying in the text, when we read verse 4 and verse 3, we will go ahead and understand that this is the goat again. This is Greece. Because it's the same application. There was one, he was powerful, he was almighty, but then it broke up into 4 parts. So we're going to explain that closer to the end of what that prophecy was about. Because I'm kind of going in chronological order here. But in chapter 11, this is in the first year of Darius the Mede. Now we're going to see later someone named Darius the First. This is Darius, who was of the Mede lineage that worked for Cyrus the Great. He's ruling Babylon around 538 BC. This is when Daniel gives this prophecy. And this is what we learn. That after Cyrus the Great, he's king right now, but Cyrus the Great in Persia, there will be 3 more kings that will rise in Persia. So 3 more, and the 4th shall be far richer. We also learn that the 4th shall stir up all against the realm of Greece. So this is what I think here in verse 1, he's actually telling these things to Darius. But he says, okay, so Cyrus the Great is the king now. 3 more will come, and the 4th one is the one I'm going to tell you about really quickly. And that he will be richer than all the others, and he shall stir up the realm of Greece. And again, if people today try to tell you this, we would just completely ignore them. Because this doesn't happen in real life without some kind of supernatural element. It doesn't. If you just try to tell me who the 4th president from our president now is going to be, I'm not going to believe you. Because it's such a long shot. Now, I can kind of maybe try to predict who's going to be the president next year. You know, or I guess it would be really 2017. The election's next year. But to predict 4 kings away, this is a big jump. He also explains again that the mighty king shall rise, rule with great dominion. His kingdom shall be broken up into 4 parts. And that's again a sum up of what we've already talked about. This is an easy one to see. So that was what was in the biblical text, the biblical source of the prophecy. This is what we know from non-biblical sources. This is just a lineup of the kings of Persia. All right, so right here we have Cyrus the Great. This is the king that Daniel works for. He works under, he's the king now. So all we have to do is count, right? 3 more kings and then the 4th one. So we count. 1, 2, 3, 4. Xerxes. So who must have Daniel been talking about? Xerxes the first. Now what's interesting about this is this guy's actually in the Bible. This is Esther's husband, Xerxes the first. Now, that's what I'm very, very confident of, because if you look in the other passage, especially if you're in the New King James, it's not going to say Xerxes. You're going to get the Latin word for his name. This is the Greek word for his name, Xerxes the first. So this is because we're looking at a non-biblical source. We're getting a non-biblical word for his name. Now, some want to say it's the other ones, and if you think that and you've studied this, I'm more welcome to talk to you about it. I want to make sure that I'm open to this. But this seems to be 100% to be Xerxes the first. Well, what did Daniel say about him? This 4th king? Well, he said that he was going to be richer and he was going to stir up the realms of Greece. So he comes to power in 86 BC. This is 102 years after Daniel's prophecy. 102 years, over a century. He is going to be great in his riches and he shall stir up all the realms of Greece. We learn about Xerxes that he had a tremendous amount of wealth. We learn from Herodotus that he had paid 60,000 soldiers, and 10,000 of them, this was a lot of money, were very costly trained. That they were with these elite warriors, that he dressed up in all these fancy clothes, 10,000 of them. He trained them since they were little to just be warriors, which would have cost so much money. This is a very expensive army. 60,000 people is a lot of people. And some even estimate that it was even closer to 1 million. So this is a lot of people that he pays for. Again, to show his wealth, we could use Esther as an example. In Esther chapter 1, what's happening? Ahasuerus, that's the Latin word there for, is having a feast for 180 days. So he gets all of his friends together, he gets all the princes and the nobles, and they all come together. And this is when he wants Queen Vishta to come out to him. And it's for 180 days. That is a long time to be having a party. I cannot afford a 180-day feast. Now, what's interesting is most kings and nobles that have lived in this earth cannot afford a 180-day feast. But he could. And as Daniel says, through his riches he shall stir up all the realm of Greece. Guess what Xerxes the first, the 4th king of Persia, does with all of his riches? He stirs up Greece. By attacking Greece and Macedonia, the city-states will rise up against him in unity in 480 BC. And basically, this is the beginning of the Greek Empire. Xerxes looks over, he sees Greece, he sees all these different individual city-states, not near the power they're going to be when Alexander the Great takes over. And he's like, I can just take these states. I can just go over there and I can take these cities and it won't be a big deal at all. Well, he goes up there and basically he's just poking the hornet's nest. He doesn't get anything accomplished. He fails. He ends up having to leave at the Battle of Palladi when Athens and Sparta and all these people decide, you know what? We could beat these people if we came together. And if we come together and unify against Persia, then we're going to be much stronger for it. And that's what they do, basically starting the beginning of the Greek Empire. Put up there the immortals, and I forgot about it. Those 10,000 that were elite trained warriors, they were called the Persian immortals. And that was their name for that. So it just shows that he was extremely wealthy and he stirred up the realm of Greece. Here's a map of what he did. And again, I don't know if you can see this. It's so difficult. You see a map on your computer screen or something or a picture and you're like, oh, this is perfect. You put it up on the projector and I don't even know if people can see it. But there's this purple line here and it shows his conquest. And basically, I only wanted to put up here because he actually stirs it up. Like, he goes out and he just circles around and he circles around and then he tries to come back over here and he basically just goes there and attacks and attacks and attacks and he pokes the hornet's nest and he runs off, creating the Greek Empire. So what did Daniel say 100 years before? He will stir up the realms of Greece. And what did Xerxes, the 4th Persian emperor, do? He stirred up the realms of Greece. Alexander Great even acknowledges this fact about what and who Xerxes was. Plutarch records that when he takes the city, he takes the capital city, and even though many kings have come after Xerxes would have been 100 years before him, he basically has this conversation, poetic conversation with Xerxes about how great he was and how powerful he was and how he stirred up Greece. He says, "Shall I pass by and leave you lying there because of the expeditions you led against Greece? Or shall I set you up again because of your magnanimity and your virtues in other respects?" He's trying to decide if he's going to rebuild his city or not, Xerxes' city. And he says, "Look, I want to leave you here and let you burn because of all the bad things you did to Greece 100 years ago. But I also want to build you up because of how glorious you were." Two things that Daniel said was going to happen again and again and again. And Daniel's always right. Continuing on, we've already talked about this several times. Daniel keeps on mentioning that the prince or the king of Greece is going to break up into these 4 kingdoms. So there's going to be 4 kingdoms from the goat's horn. 4 generals take Alexander's empire, and the states become around 305 BC. So it says as the goat was getting great and getting powerful and getting strong, that all of a sudden the horn would break, and it would break up into these 4 different kingdoms based off of this one kingdom. So again, we're looking over here, 253 years after Daniel's vision of the goat. And again, this helps me think about it, but 2016 plus 253, that would be 2,269. So that would be somebody prophesying in 2016 was going to happen in 2,269, or backwards. That would be 1763. That's before the U.S. even was started. That was the end of the French and Indian War. But that would be somebody saying something like that and being so specific 200 years later. That does not happen unless you have God's help. It does not happen unless you have God's help. But what happened? It happened. It happened just like Daniel said it would. Alexander the Great is in his early 30s. This seems like he's going to be unstoppable, but one night he gets drunk, and then he gets sick, and then he dies in his early 30s. And guess what happens? The generals start fighting over who's going to take over the empire because he has no heir. And he hasn't told anyone who the heir was going to be since he didn't have any children at that moment. So the 4 generals fight, and you don't know how many way this is going to break up, but you end up having 4 of them really come to power, and 40 years after the fighting, there's 4 solid, stable kingdoms after the Greek kingdom. 253 years after Daniel said that was going to happen. You cannot do this unless God tells you to write this. You cannot. But that's what happens. The rest of chapter 11, and I'm not going to get into it because it was very, very hard for me to understand the rest of chapter 11. But basically what it does is it describes Seleucus, which is going to be the yellow up here. That was going to be one kingdom, and it describes Ptolemy, the Egyptian kingdom, that's going to break off. The reason why Daniel prophesies about this is because Jerusalem is going to be in the middle of this conflict. And that's what chapter 11 is all about. And at the end of chapter 11, it gets more and more specific about the bad things that are going to happen to Jerusalem, maybe not so much as the big empires are concerned. So looking at this, and let me just share 2 of them with you, 2 verses. It's the tip of the iceberg, and then I'll be done with prophecies. So verse 5 of chapter 11 says, "The king of the south," now of the 4 kingdoms that we're going to break off, the kingdom of the south would be Ptolemy, the Egyptian kingdom, "shall become strong as well as one of his princes, and he shall gain power over him and have dominion. His dominion shall be a great dominion." So it says basically the king of the south, whom we know as Ptolemy because it's already happened, is going to have this great dominion, and that's what happens. It says here, this guy that did this map, and I tend to agree with him, Seleucus is actually going to come and live with Ptolemy for a while, and he explains that's why Daniel said that one of his princes will come and work with him. But that's what happens in the next couple of years. Ptolemy, the Egyptian empire, this Egyptian kingdom that's broken off of the goat's horn, becomes very powerful. And this is what Daniel said would happen in verse 5. Let's just look at verse 6 now. "And at the end of some years, they shall join forces, for the daughter of the king of the south, Ptolemy's daughter, shall go to the king of the north to make an agreement. But she shall not retain the power of her authority, and neither he nor his authority shall stand, but she shall be given up, with those who brought her, and with him who begot her, and with him who strengthened her in those times." So if we just look at verse 6, we see that the kingdom of the north will give his daughter to the kingdom of the south will give his daughter to the kingdom of the north to make an alliance. However, she will be given up, including all the people with her to support her. That's what Daniel said. Now you see it actually happen in real life. So what happens is Antiochus II agrees to a peace treaty. That's who's running this. He's the king of the north now. That he agrees to a peace treaty with Ptolemy in 250 BC. And guess how they formed that alliance? Well, the king of the north married Ptolemy's daughter. That's how the alliance was agreed upon. Now guess how the alliance fell apart? Because she was rejected. What happens is after Ptolemy dies, the king of the north, Antiochus in this case, he realizes that he doesn't want to marry her. He wants to get back with his other wife that he already had, and he kills Bernice, Ptolemy's daughter, and then he kills all the people that's with her. So let me read Daniel 6 one more time. At the end of some years they shall join forces, for the daughter of the king of the south shall go to the king of the north and make an agreement that he shall not retain the power of the authority, and neither he nor his authority shall stand, but she shall be given up. And those who brought her. Daniel's right again. He keeps on getting right over and over and over and over again. And guys, I'm not going to do it because I love y'all and I don't want y'all to be here all night. But I can sit here and I've got 13 more of these pictures that go through chapter 11 and explains it. And he's saying this stuff 300 years before it actually happens. It's incredible. Let me look at this passage. Here's my sources if y'all want to check me. 2 Peter 1:19. And this explains why Daniel was always right. And he here is actually talking about messianic prophecies. That's what he's really talking about here. But the prophecies, in a sense, it works. It still works. 2 Peter 1:19. And so we have the prophetic word confirmed, which you do well to heed as a light that shines in a dark place, until the day dawns and the morning star rises in your hearts, knowing this first, that no prophecy of Scripture is of any private interpretation. For prophecy never came by the will of man, but holy men of God spoke as they were moved by the Holy Spirit. Daniel was a holy man, and the reason why he was able to call the things that happened 200, 300 years before it ever happened was because he was a holy man and he was inspired by the Holy Spirit. That's why Daniel was able to do the stuff he was able to do. That's why we have that book. That's why Alexander the Great read it. That's why we read it today, is because God got involved. He got involved. The reason why I wanted to share you Daniel with this case is because the book of Daniel, and especially when you look at the things that we've really looked at, which is really just the tip of the iceberg, is that the book of Daniel backs every single person into a corner. And you only have two options. And that's what is one, and this is what God wants. He wants to see what's right in front of you. He wants you to see his power through prophecy. And you have to come to one conclusion. Daniel's God was alive. He was alive and he was real and he got involved and he was inspired by God to write these things. Only with God he was able to do and say the things he did. That's the conclusion he wants. The other thing you have to do is you have to turn around, you have to close your eyes real tight and plug your fingers in your ears and just say, he's not real, he's not real, he's not real, he's not real. And you have to be completely unreasonable and completely unrational to understand that Daniel's God was alive. Our God is alive. And Daniel, in his prophecy, shows God's power. And that's what's so incredible about our God and what's so incredible about this book, is he could predict things, prophesy things that there's no way that Daniel could have simply guessed. It's because our God is alive. If there's anyone here that realizes that and wants to be saved, of course we want to help you do that, and we're going to give you that opportunity to do that. If someone who needs the prayers of the congregation as a whole, we'll be happy to do that for you tonight. But I also want to just give an invitation to us that are already Christians. When you read about God's prophecies and you see them come true, and especially when we get to see those messianic prophecies, and we see them come true later in the New Testament, I want you to be inspired. And let the Word of God do its job and be in awe of how awesome our God is. And that will inspire you to keep on in this life and to build your faith and to build your relationship closer to Him. If there's any way we can assist you tonight,